It was a crisp, clear evening in the bustling city of Chicago. The year was 1893, and the World's Fair was in full swing. People from all over the world had gathered to witness the most spectacular event of the century. The fairgrounds were full of innovation, with towering buildings, exotic exhibits, and dazzling lights. But amidst all the joy and excitement, something dark was about to unfold. Detective James Monroe, a sharp-witted investigator with a reputation for solving the most baffling cases, was in Chicago to attend the fair. He had heard about the incredible new inventions and wanted to see them firsthand. However, he had no idea that his skills would soon be put to the test in a way he never expected. It was just after sunset when the call came in. Monroe was in the midst of admiring the Eiffel Tower replica when an urgent message reached him. A murder had taken place inside the fairgrounds. The victim was a well-known businessman, Charles Thornton, who had been a part of the American delegation. He had been found dead inside the Grand Court, a massive exhibition hall showcasing the best of American art and industry. His body was discovered by a young woman named Emily Green, a fair employee who was responsible for guiding visitors through the exhibits. Monroe quickly made his way to the scene, where a small crowd had already gathered. The room was dimly lit, and the only sound was the echo of footsteps on the marble floor. The victim was lying face down, a faint trace of blood near his head. His once crisp suit was now stained, and his hand gripped something tightly. Monroe bent down to examine it. It was a piece of paper, torn from what appeared to be a letter. He carefully unfolded it and saw a single sentence written in neat handwriting. The truth is hidden beneath the surface. Monroe's mind raced. The phrase was cryptic, yet it seemed to suggest something deeper. He stood up and turned his attention to the surrounding crowd. Everyone seemed nervous, unsure of what had just happened. Emily Green, the young woman who had discovered the body, stood nearby, her face pale. Monroe approached her gently. "Miss Green, can you tell me what happened?" he asked. Emily hesitated for a moment before speaking. I was walking through the hall, checking to make sure everything was in order. When I passed by Mr. Thornton, he was sitting at a table, looking over some papers. I didn't think much of it, but when I came back to check on him later, I found him like this. Dead. Did you notice anyone else nearby? Monroe asked, his sharp eyes scanning the room. No, not at all, Emily replied, shaking her head. It was just Mr. Thornton and me. I don't know what happened. Monroe's instinct told him that something didn't add up. The area had been crowded, yet no one had seen anything suspicious. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air. Monroe examined the scene further. There were no signs of a struggle, and no weapon was visible. The torn letter was the only clue. He glanced around the Grand Court and noticed an exhibit nearby that seemed out of place, a large, ornate fountain standing in the center of the room. It was a beautiful piece, with delicate carvings and water gently flowing from its basin. But Monroe couldn't shake the feeling that something about it was wrong. He approached the fountain, his eyes scanning every inch of it. As he circled the fountain, he noticed something unusual. One of the carvings on the base of the fountain seemed loose. He carefully pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, he found a small leather-bound notebook. It appeared to be Mr. Thornton's personal journal. Monroe opened the journal and quickly flipped through the pages. Most of it was filled with business notes and sketches of fair exhibits, but one entry stood out. It was dated just days before the murder. The key to unlocking the truth lies in the waters of the fair. But there are those who would stop me from discovering what is hidden beneath. I must be careful. Monroe frowned. The journal seemed to suggest that Thornton had been investigating something much bigger than anyone realized. But what was it? And who would want him dead? As Monroe pondered these questions, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Detective Monroe?" a man called out. Monroe turned to find a tall, well-dressed gentleman standing at the entrance of the Grand Court. He introduced himself as William Harper, the fair's chief organizer. "I was told you were investigating the murder," Harper said, his voice tense. "I don't know what you found, but I need to warn you. There are people involved in this fair who would go to great lengths to keep their secrets hidden." Monroe raised an eyebrow. "Secrets? What do you mean?" Harper looked around nervously before leaning in closer. "There are powerful people with interest that go far beyond the fair itself. Mr. Thornton was investigating corruption within the planning of the exhibits. He was getting too close to the truth. And now he's dead." Monroe's mind was racing. Thornton had been on the verge of uncovering something major, something that could shake the foundations of the fair. But what exactly had he discovered? And who was behind the murder? Before Monroe could ask any more questions, Harper quickly walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Determined to uncover the truth, Monroe spent the next several days questioning everyone he could find connected to Thornton. He discovered that the businessman had been seen arguing with several powerful figures in the days leading up to his death. But it wasn't until Monroe spoke with a former colleague of Thornton's that the pieces finally fell into place. Colleague, a man named Thomas Caldwell, revealed that Thornton had been investigating a major embezzlement scheme involving funds meant for the construction of the fair. The scheme was being orchestrated by a group of businessmen who had secretly diverted money to their own pockets. They'd used the fair as a cover for their criminal activities. Monroe's suspicions were confirmed. Thornton had uncovered the conspiracy, and the powerful men behind it had silenced him to protect their interests. With this new information, Monroe gathered the evidence and exposed the criminals behind the plot. Their arrests shocked the fairgoers, and the truth about Thornton's death was finally revealed. As for Monroe, he returned to his quiet life as a detective, knowing that he had once again uncovered a mystery that others had tried to bury. But he would never forget the murder at the World's Fair, the case that had revealed how far some would go to hide the truth beneath the surface.